not available here, but manufacturing sector is 35%. And if you take, say, Singapore, which is a small country, in 70s, 24% of it is manufacturing and most of it is export. So all these economies, when they were making money or when they were creating their wealth, you will find export-oriented manufacturing is the one. I mean, so basically, India should follow that and increases the share of its manufacturing in the GDP. Well, this is from Accenture. You can find that in terms of the logistics, manufacturing is dependent on the logistics, both domestic as well as the international logistics. So it's hampered by inefficient logistics. So India and China are here. I mean, it's not a consolation that even the logistics in China is bad, but it's bad. So India is rated 54th among 59 countries on the average. By road, it is 56, it is rail, it's 50, and you're all on 50s. Except air, it is 40. And results in increased costs of, and reduces competitiveness. So basically, you can see a global comparison of the GDPs. And potential savings with improved logistics is, if you save 10% of GDP, you save $70 billion. So this comes free almost. Okay, I mean, given the kind of status, where can Indian manufacturing go from here? I mean, this is purely personal. You can differ from it, you can argue with it, you can send me an email if you don't. Mass produced locally. Food, textiles, auto, pharma, etc. Because there's no way you can export autos. Maybe you have to export to South Africa or Bangladesh, but not to any advanced countries. But on the other hand, there is a local requirement of these autos, motorbikes, and so on. Hero Honda follows this strategy. They don't have any import because Hero, the Japanese counterpart, has a partner in every country, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. So basically, they don't have any export potential, but they produce, and they are going to have a plant soon in the south. And mass customized for export, pharma, food, textiles, and so on. Unleash the potential in retail, after-sales service, domestic as well as global. And contract manufacturing, move up the so-called component manufacturers should move up the up the value chain into contract manufacturing. What I mean by contract manufacturing is end-to-end delivery. You receive the order, you deliver to the customer site. Now let's look at this particular diagram. Here, India should concentrate on its strengths. So the strengths are in agriculture. I'll tell you why. And it has in retail, in textile, pharma, and gems, IT, and so on. So if you take IT, for example, in terms of the international competitiveness and India's sectoral competitiveness, IT is the top. But the bubble size is the employment potential. So it doesn't, I mean, in terms of both the size, it is $80 billion, and it employs God knows how many, but they are all graduates. And in terms of agriculture, retail, textile, and industrial manufacturing, these are large bubbles because they can employ a lot of people. So the welfare of the state is also an important issue here. So basically, you invest in agriculture, get into food processing, and export to the world. And India has the potential to become the food supplier for the entire world. I'll show you in the next slide. And develop domestic markets for retail. I mean, once you have the organized retail, develop domestic markets through industrial products, and then move up the value chain. So this is basically the diagram that I think is possible to do. What is the state of the Indian food sector? What are the strengths? Vast natural resources. I mean, 40% of the land in India is cultivable. And if you take worldwide, it is 11%. And the next one is established farming system. I mean, it may be inefficient, but there is a farming system. It's a growing economy, and government is supporting it through FDI, SCJETs, Special Economic Zones, and APJETs, agriculture export processing zones, and subsidies, and so on. And India has a name for vital outsourcing hub, so it can be a food hub. What are the weaknesses? Small-scale conventional farming, and if you have a food processing plant, you can process all this. I mean, there are drying technologies which will keep the fruits forever. So hardly any food processing industry. 2% is the one that is processed. Inadequate cold chain infrastructure. Okay, what is the consequence of this? Surplus food wasted away, low incomes to the farmers. And there are 6 intermediaries between the farmer and the consumer. I mean, either the mandis, the distributors, whomever you call, there are 6 of them. And between each of them, there is manual handling. So you have assumed these fruits and vegetables and the fruit that you eat. Each of them are manually handled 6 times, resulting in the wastage and the food spoiled and so on. And of course, the food is inefficient, and there is no channel master. Now, this is the big problem in India, in the food. Who is the channel master? I mean, for computers, Dell is the master, HP, IBM. If you take the US, Walmart is the channel master, if it is buying the foods, General Foods, whatever. I mean, it is going to be either the food manufacturer or the retailer. But in India, you don't have a big food manufacturer. So it actually goes one step from the other, and it's not produced to demand. Why are you producing tomatoes in your farms? Because my grandfather did it. It's not because there is a food processing country and they want a special quality tomatoes that are needed for making a juice or a pulp or something, or a sauce. I am not producing for that to a requirement. So all these industrial supply chain principles that have been discussed this morning can be applied here, and none of them, believe me, have been applied in the food processing context. And changing consumer preferences are not this one. I mean, India is the only country where processed food is more expensive than fresh cooked food, which should be expensive, fresh cooked food, right? But processed food, there are all kinds of taxes. Sales tax, 10%. On the packaging, there is 10%. Packaging machinery, 50% tax. So because of these government policies, there's the processing industry is there. So, well, you can comply, but the other thing is an opportunity. The opportunity is that cold chain infrastructure builders, processed food manufacturers, food logistics providers, food retailers, IT and data analysts, and packaging specialists. I mean, there are huge opportunities in India and potential to become a leading food supplier for the whole world. If you look at the statistics of how much food and fruits and vegetables are produced in India, it's actually, and if you take away the wastages and you invest in 1 year's wastage, you can get the cold chain infrastructure, and then you have the potential. You can become a halal hub. You know, Muslims, when they eat food, they have to go through, it has to be halal. Halal has a certification procedure. So if you produce processed food, halal, you can get to Indonesia, Malaysia, then Middle East, and there are locally 200 million Muslims here. There are lots of vegetarians, 10% of the global population are this one. Organic food. India is one of the leading countries where you can have the organic. So you can become a hub in several directions in this. That's one sector. In retail, $100 billion, $180 billion opportunity, 10% annual growth. Food processing and retail is 50 billion. And retail is not considered as an industry. I mean, if you look at retail, I mean, this is the figure, this is an artist figure. One of my young friends, Pavani, she has given me this figure, and this is from a painting. And that is how the flowers are sold in India. Through that, you want to move to this kind of organized retailing. And there is a huge opportunity in this space. There are 5 million retail outlets. And government is afraid if you allow FDI in this, these people will lose the employment. But not so, because the people who work in these outlets, they are unorganized employees. So that you convert it to organized employees, through the retail. I'm not considering Walmart is a great employer, but right now 100% FDI is not allowed in foreign companies, least saturated of global markets. And I think A.T. Kearney has a study which shows that India is the #1 destination, preferred destination, if anybody wants to get into India and so on. When 100% FDI is allowed, believe me, the whole agriculture sector is going to go through a turbulent model. Because if you're a food retailer, you want a certain quality. You're selling to a certain quality of people, high end. For making your tomato juice, you cannot do it from any tomatoes. You have to have a certain quality of the tomatoes, the size, and so on. So the retailers are going to set their own standards and the quality procedures and so on. Right now, the food supply chain or the retail chain is supply chain inconsistent. The policies that the government have is supply chain inconsistent. In other words, if you look at all the regulations, if you take the most regulated sector of the food supply chain, then you cannot do very much. For example, the retailer has a restriction on urban land. He cannot own farms in this. Several other things which are involved in this. But I think eventually this is all going to be done and so on. Well, the next sector is the manufacturing-related services. After sales is a big market, much more profitable and less developed market. This is because you take a spare part, same warehouse which stores the ordinary part charges 10 times for the warehouse space for a spare part. And service innovations and service science are much needed. Today in the newspapers, IBM has announced a service science center in Bangalore. And last year they have started a center in the Almaden lab of IBM. Service center physics, like what we were talking about, factory physics, factory mathematics in the 80s, the same kind of thing is going to happen in service innovations and so on. India has a tremendous advantage in this. Why? Because you produce the components. You have the design R&D. Then what else do you need for the repair? You have designed the product, you have this particular components, so all that you have to do is disassemble the product and put the component, right? But after sales hub is a step away, but needs high-speed logistics, because any repair, particularly if you have a bank and the server has failed, and if you want to repair and then flow out a hard disk or something, then it has to be done within a few hours. So you need high-speed logistics. You just tell me when I'm 5 minutes away. So the other thing is there is a lot of newspaper publicity about special economic zones. In fact, in China, most of it is FDI. 50–60% of the FDI goes through the special economic zones. These are special zones, no man's lands, with special regulations, special executive policies, special labor policies, and so on. And India is the one, 1961, who started this particular thing. But Indian special economic zones are not doing very well. And in fact, there are later several regulations. In May this year, there was a regulation passed in the parliament converting the SEZs into something. This does not change the picture. If you look, I'll show you one thing. This is the one in Bombay, right? What is it that is manufactured here? Apparel, auto, light engineering, pharmaceuticals, food processing, telecom, applications, everything under the sun. So you have an area in which you want to manufacture everything under the sun. One of the fundamental principles of this is to have a cluster And there should be synergies for this cluster, either in terms of logistics or in terms of the knowledge or something. But here you don't have anything. And this is the one with the NIDA. And these are the two zones which are doing very well. So I think the proposal is that if you have any such thing, you have to have four things. One is the physical assets, the information assets, and a compelling vertical industry, and knowledge creators. So if these things are designed, redesigned to have this, probably will be this one. So, well, I will just quickly, this one. I mean, efficient global logistics is more than brick and mortar infrastructure. In other words, it's much more than the roads and so on. Well, if your logistics affects both direct costs and indirect costs. I mean, people are aware of the direct costs like transportation, warehousing, and so on. Indirect costs, stock outs, unnecessarily high inventories, obsolescence, and so on. And efficient logistics can increase the cost competitiveness. Some suggestions to overcome the infrastructure barrier: short-term employ smart process and IT solutions. Employ IT proneness in logistics and trade, and apply 4PL model or knowledge-based logistics provider model, and have electronic trade documentation. Now let's deal with the electronic trade documentation here. In the domestic case, if you're a seller and a buyer, the domestic carrier collects it and delivers it. But if you're a global player, what happens? You have to go through the exporter, banks, domestic carriers, vessels, customs, and security, 24-hour notification to the US government, I mean, all kinds of things. So there are 180 documents, and each of these equipment goes through several ports. And the more ports it's crossed, the more this one, I mean, there is the transshipments and so on that goes on. So basically, if you automate the trading documents, I mean, it will save a lot of this one. I mean, Singapore saves $1 billion a year